next subject, Mark?
Well, the next thing we're going to talk about is firearms and estate transfers.
Wait a minute, are we talking about California's laws on firearms?
Well,
and
we've
estate
got
transfer?
federal and California law, so it gets a little complicated. So first of all, you have the National Firearms Act, the NFA, and that deals with guns that are associated with gangs, such as sawed-off shotguns, machine guns, and silencers.
Well, most of those weapons are illegal under federal government and
Right.
under each state government.
Right. And so if you have that in the estate and you're the attorney, you transfer that on to someone, you're going to be in a lot of trouble.
But wait a minute. Every state and the federal government has extensive laws on transferring firearms under any condition, and they want to make sure that the people that are receiving the firearms, number one, can legally receive them.
Right.
Number two, that the weapon is legal to begin with. And there's very few exceptions under these laws, and mostly for antique guns or collector's items that are effectively not really working.
Right.
But those are kind of exempt from this. But even those can go under strict scrutiny,
Right.
based on the fact that they have some kind of cartridge or some kind of carbine, or they hold too many rounds. Even the antique guns,
Yeah, well, there's
and
a
the
big
collector's items can have those problems
actually,
too.
San Francisco tried to outlaw ammunition.
Well, that's nice. You know, that
Yeah.
way they don't have to outlaw guns, and they
Yeah.
say, well, hey, I can outlaw ammunition.
But they lost that court case. But also there's a thing of, how much stuff you can put in a clip, how many rounds you can put in a clip, and that kind of thing.
Well, California is one of the most restrictive states for
Right.
that. In fact, now you can't even technically have any kind of rifle that holds more than 10 rounds in the clip.
Uh-huh.
And if you have even weapons that were legal up to 5 years ago are now illegal for a variety of reasons, including stocks that are folding, including hand grips that are the front of the receiver portion of the gun, removable clips that hold more than 10 rounds, of course, or guns that actually fire too fast even under a semi-automatic condition.
Right. And so, yeah, there's a lot of restrictions there. And so, but there is a difference between holding title and having possession.
And what is that difference, Mark?
Well, you could hold title to something as long as you didn't possess it if you had like a temporary incapacity to have that possession.
Well, wait a minute. This is reaching into another law where California just had a bill signed by the governor that stated that even a family member that believed somebody in their family was either mentally incompetent, they believed they were a danger to themselves, they can have those weapons confiscated immediately without probable cause, other than a family member saying, turn them in.
Yes, and that's going to go into effect, I think, January 1st, so this coming year, 2015. And the thing about that is like there's big due process issues here of whether you actually get to face your accuser on that.
Well, you may never know who your accuser is.
So,
that could be an anonymous tip from your
Right.
brother.
So, or it could be the police said that it's a family member, but they
In
never.
reality, it could be a next-door neighbor.
Or it could be the cops themselves.
And in fact, the
Yeah.
cops can do that if
Yeah.
they believe, if they see the activities of an individual look like there's something wacko with
Right.
the person. One, that could be somebody picking their nose in broad daylight, I guess.
No, but I mean, there's been a lot of instances where there's certain ways of gaining information and making reports where false reports, the police do false reports.
Yeah, but
So-
unfortunately, police do false reports,
Yeah.
and they don't often prosecute people that turn in false information.
And-
that should be a more prosecuted crime.
And so anyway, that's a brand new law, not tested the constitutionality of it, but that goes to the question of, sometimes there's a restraining order, right? And if someone has a restraining order against them, they may not be able to have possession of guns for so many years, but that might be rescinded after a certain amount of time, then they could take possession.
Well, the standard restraining order now says you can't control any weapons at all, and in fact,
But the restraining order would have.
I've had a case within the last year where a family member said that the person that possessed, he was a gun collector,
Right.
and even though he had done nothing violent at all, they said, well, he has guns, and so I want a restraining order, and they got a restraining order against him, not because he had done anything, just because of what they thought he might
Well, it's an
do.
accusation, but that's what I'm saying. There's no due process to question it. And then you also have other situations like a felony that, you can't possess a gun if you've had a felony.
Of course.
And then there's also a situation where you're ruled mentally defective or incapacitated.
Correct.
Where you couldn't have a weapon. And I think this new law is going into that territory. We're saying it's kind of between a restraining order and a mentally defective. They're saying this person's mentally defective, and so we should get a restraining order to them, but they don't get to face their accuser, and there's no due process.
Well, in a restraining order today, you have the ability you can get a temporary restraining order immediately if there's some
Right.
violence. But that restraining order will be found to be legal or not legal in a court hearing that has to be set for normally 10 to 15 days out, and you have to be able to attend that and face who's ever saying that. But under this law, there's a whole question on whether or not that you're even allowed to do that.
Yeah, you may not be able to. And also, in a typical restraining order, if the TRO doesn't have any basis, you could say, well, I want to quash that. I want that off the record. I don't even want that to exist because that was found to be untrue because I didn't have a hearing until it goes to the full-blown restraining order.
Yeah, but see, the whole thing is a judge makes the decision whether or not a full-blown restraining order will be enacted.
And he can also quash the TRO.
And he can also quash the TRO.
But a lot of people fight the restraining order. They don't get the restraining order, but they forget to quash the TRO. That's still, every time a cop pulls you over,
you're automatically listed.
That comes up on there. You know.
Yeah, in fact, what you have to do is you have to ensure that the court orders it quashed.
Right.
And if the court doesn't order it, you have to tell the judge because judges don't always remember to quash the restraining order.
Well, you have to request.
You have to request it.
And so that's what's going on now. So there's, there's a lot of issues with who can possess a gun, what kind of gun they can possess. And there's even a thing called the Gun Control Act, which is things that could be easily turned into a gun.
Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Are you telling me my coffee cup, if I want to turn this into a weapon,
it looks a lot like it looks like one of those old-fashioned mortars.
It does look like
mortars.
It looks like a hand grenade, actually.
It looks like one of those
turned into a dangerous weapon.
Mortars
I mean, how far can you throw the coffee cup?
No, but if you have something that could be turned into a gun, that would fall under the Gun Control Act. So even that, in an estate, if you're doing an estate planning,
right,
and you bequeath that and you do that transfer, that could be a problem too.
What about this pen?
Yeah.
I understand with a battery and a flying ink piece, you could turn this into a dangerous weapon.
Yeah, you could.
And in California, my God, all pens will be outlawed. Okay, and only outlaws will have pens.
But you get exemptions for antiques.
Oh, exemptions
for antiques. So if it's an antique, then you can argue that it's an antique.
Yeah, but what's the exemption? I mean, what is an antique?
Well, an antique, I think it's supposed to be more than 50 years old.
Okay, what if I have a Thompson machine gun from the 20s? Is that an antique and it's fully automatic?
Well, I don't know if that would fall under something that could be easily converted to a firearm.
Would that be something you could easily load and fire as a firearm?
I think that already is a firearm, so. But then, it depends on the modification. So, so those are some of the things that you face as far as gun laws, and you want to be very careful when you're handling.
Okay, let's talk. I do understand that oftentimes fathers want to bequeath their gun collection to their sons or something like that. So I understand the new law makes it the responsibility of the person that wants to bequeath all this through a trust or whatever. It makes them have to determine whether or not that that person can actually receive the weapon.
Well, actually, the attorney handling the estate could pick up liability.
The attorney handling the estate?
Yeah, the attorney handling the estate has to watch out. Oh, they have to go through this and make sure that everything that's being handed over is a legal weapon, and also that the person they're giving to legally can accept it.
Yeah, but see, I got a question. If the attorney's handling the estate, how is the attorney's opportunity to be prosecuted because they didn't check to see if the person's background was sufficient to own a firearm?
Well, I'm just saying it is a liability for the attorney, so you would want to be very careful.
Well, I got to tell you something, Mark, this is getting to be a little bit scary. California.
Well, I'm just saying, and now it's very difficult to buy a gun now.
Yeah, well,
difficult.
You know what I'm going to say
and
is
it's difficult to buy ammunition.
You know what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to watch the legal cases as they come down on this because there's going to be a lot of ramifications.
Well, we'll see if there's a constitutional, challenge to this gun confiscation, the family gun confiscation.
Yeah, I think that's going to be coming up. And what we're going to have to do, Mark, is we're going to have to wait and watch how this plays out. So why don't we move on to what's our last section tonight?
Well,
what do we cover?